So in this session we will learn how to set up the Raspberry Pi in a headless method. In headless method, the main advantage is we don't need external peripherals like a keyboard, mouse or monitor. And this is the preferred method for using Raspberry Pi in IoT projects. So this is the efficient way of setting up Raspberry Pi. But if you are just a beginner and has not much idea about a bit of SSH giving IP addresses and related steps, then you can start with first method, that is a normal method, as sometimes headless method is a bit tricky and will not work as expected for beginners. But as I mentioned before, if you are planning to do IoT projects with a Raspberry Pi, then the preferred method is headless method. So from the next slide I will detail about setting up the Raspberry Pi in a headless method. So regardless of which method you use, you need a power source and a memory card. You can download this slide, PowerPoint presentation slide, from the link given in the description section of this video, and you can read in detail. So if your laptop doesn't contain a microSD card reader, you have to use a external card reader like the one I have shown in this image. So insert the microSD card in the external card reader and your laptop will detect it. And you have to download the Raspberry Pi Imager utility from the link given here. So after downloading the Raspberry Pi Imager utility, you have to double click this file and run it. First you have to choose the Raspberry Pi OS from the operating system list, and then next you have to choose the microSD card. After that you have to click on the settings button and you have to configure certain parameters there. So these are the options you have to configure in the settings option. First you have to set a host name. You have to give any unique host name like you want, and then you have to enable SSH. After that you have to give a username and password, and we will use this username and password to log into the Raspberry Pi OS later. And when you configure the wireless LAN, that is the Wi-Fi, you have to give the same SSID and password you are using in your project laptop. Otherwise you won't be able to connect to the Raspberry Pi. You can read all these things in detail after downloading the presentation file. This is how we have to configure those options in the settings menu. So after giving all those options, you can click the save button. It will take few minutes to download and write the operating system. After that it will show the completion message, and you can click on the continue button. After that you can remove the microSD card from the card reader. After removing the microSD card from the card reader, you can insert that into the Raspberry Pi. So when you insert the microSD card in the Raspberry Pi, please be very careful, because if you insert it in a wrong direction, that will damage the ports of the Raspberry Pi's card reader. So please check this video very carefully and do like this only. After that you have to download two small softwares. First one is Putty and second one is the Advanced IP Scanner. So Putty is a SSH client that you can use to connect to the Raspberry Pi operating system from your laptop. And the Advanced IP Scanner is a program used to list the devices connected in the Wi-Fi network. Actually, you can download this presentation file and read these things in very detail and understand it very carefully. You can know the IP address of your laptop from the Wi-Fi connection properties and from the menu like the one shown here. So for example, if the IP address you got for your laptop is 192.168.3.105, then your IP address range the router provides will be from 192.168.3.1 to 192.168.3.254. So while scanning using the advanced IP scanner utility, you have to give that range, like the one shown here, that is from 192.168.3.1 to 254-254. This range can change according to the Wi-Fi router settings that you are using. As we have mentioned in the first session, there are no particular on-off switch in the Raspberry Pi board. So as soon as you connect the power supply and turn it on, the Raspberry Pi will start its booting process. So you can wait for 1 or 2 minutes to allow the Pi for completing the booting process. After completing the booting process, you can again run the advanced IP scanner and scan the network with the same IP range like we did before. So if the booting process is successful and the Raspberry Pi is online, you can see the name of the Raspberry Pi when you scan using the advanced IP scanner, like this. You can see an IP address in the entry, and this is the IP address of our Raspberry Pi now. Actually, this IP address Raspberry Pi gets from the Wi-Fi router. So once the Raspberry Pi is assigned with an IP address, we can use the Putty utility to connect. We can run the Putty utility and give the host name. Host name is the IP address along with the username. You can give the username at the IP address like this format. And also you can save that session by giving any name here and clicking the save button. But this is optional. But if you save the session, you don't need to type again the host name next time when you start the Putty utility for connecting to the Raspberry Pi. And after giving the host name, we can click the open button for connection. If the connection is successful, it will ask for a password, and this is the password we give at the time of settings. It will prompt to enter the password, and you can give the password you gave. If the password entered is correct, you will successfully log into the Raspberry Pi operating system, and you can see a prompt like this. So from the next session, we can see the Raspberry Pi IoT programming examples. If you have any doubts for setting up your Raspberry Pi or any doubts regarding the examples, IoT examples given in these sessions, you can contact through this given mail ID.